Welcome to our guided journey to the cross. As we begin this journey, clear yourself of distractions, seeking stillness and silence before God. The journey's going to challenge you, and it doesn't shy away from the suffering Jesus experienced on his journey. Our prayer is that the stillness, the space, and the time help you to reflect deeply on Jesus' journey and subsequently on your own journey to the cross of Jesus. So let's begin at the very beginning. In the beginning, God created and said, "It is good." Imagine the infant world in all its perfection. Imagine what it was like when every relationship was perfect. The relationships between people and God were perfect. The relationships between people and other people were perfect. And the relationship between people and the earth was perfect. Imagine. And then sin entered the world. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. How do you view brokenness in the world? How do you view brokenness in your life situations? And how do you view brokenness in yourself? Jesus went out, as usual, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you don't fall into temptation." And he withdrew about a stone throws beyond them. He knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him, and being in anguish he prayed all the more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Jesus knew all the pain and suffering he was about to experience. Can you sense his anguish? Do you feel his struggle? And yet he still says, "Not my will, but yours be done." Jesus' sacrifice wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He chose to take the journey to the cross in spite of the great cost. Is there an area of your life where you need to make a choice to love and sacrifice, even if it comes with a cost? Some time earlier, the one called Judas Iscariot went to the chief priest and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver Jesus over to you?" So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. And from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over. While Jesus was still speaking to his disciples in the Olive Garden, Judas, his betrayer, arrived. With him was a large crowd of armed men with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priest and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, Judas, had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. How much is your integrity worth? Why is it that we seem so prone to compromise our values so quickly for money? Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You said so," Jesus replied. Pilate asked him, "Do you hear the testimonies that they're bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. While Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, Jesus. I've suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." Now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Barabbas. So when the crowd gathered, Pilate asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who's called the Messiah?" Pilate knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests and the elders stirred up the crowds to demand Barabbas's release, and to have Jesus executed. Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" asked the governor. "Barabbas," they answered. "Barabbas." "Well, what shall I do then with Jesus, who's called the Messiah?" Pilate asked. They all answered, "Crucify him." "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. They shouted all the louder, "Crucify him." Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, and that instead an uproar was starting. He took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It's your responsibility." Then he released Barabbas to them. What emotions did the crowd draw up in you? How do you think Jesus felt in those moments? Can you sympathise at all with Pilate seemingly not fighting for what was right and just? Are there any areas of your life where you act like Pilate, participating in some way in injustice because it's easier than fighting for what's right? Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You were also with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out into the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath. "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you're one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately a cockerel crowed, and Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. "Before the cockerel crows, you'll disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. When we're guilty of betrayal, sometimes it's not motivated by financial gain, as with Judas, but rather social acceptance, like Peter. Brennan Manning said, "The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyles. That's what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." Think of the times you've denied Jesus with your words or your silence, your actions or your inaction. Before handing him over to be crucified, Pilate had Jesus flogged. The soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered a whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him, put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him. They took a staff and they struck him on the head again and again. Some deaths are quick. Some deaths are noble. This death was neither. It's one thing to kill a person. It's another to shame and humiliate them. Think for a moment. The King of Heaven has spit sliding down his face. Oh, the divine disgrace of our Saviour. When they came to the place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross. And there they crucified him, along with 2 criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Jesus talked a lot about loving enemies and forgiving others. But here at the cross, he goes beyond words and ideals and teaches us with an example. With the nail digging into his flesh and the hammer hovering, he offers forgiveness. So in your life, who are the soldiers with nails and hammers that you could extend forgiveness to? It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And with that, he breathed his last. Imagine you're standing in front of the cross with the disciples. Can you feel the presence of death? Can you feel the heaviness of despair? Can you feel the sorrow, emptiness, confusion? Can you feel the darkness? Joseph of Arimathea went to ask Pilate for the body of Jesus. Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who had earlier visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with the Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden was a tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Try to imagine the emotion of those two disciples as they reverently but hurriedly laid in the tomb Jesus' body before the Sabbath rest had to begin. How would you feel? Stood at the funeral service of the most remarkable person you had ever met, and the one who you thought would change the world forever. Jesus said to his disciples, "I am going to do what's best for you. That's why I'm going away." Jesus said to his disciples, "I'm going to do what's best for you. That's why I'm going away. The Holy Spirit cannot come to help you until I leave. But after I'm gone, I'll send the Spirit to you." You think this is what's best for us, Jesus? They humiliated you on a cross. And we're humiliated too because we put our trust in you. No wonder Peter denied you. Maybe it wasn't out of fear, but out of sheer bloody rage that this is how the dream ended. How can you think this is what's best for us? We put everything we had into you, our trust, our belief that you were the one who could save us. You offered us a taste of welcome, a hint of grace, a touch of freedom. For a moment we glimpsed a new world, and you promised an eternity of that, and we trusted you. We're left wondering which is worse, that it ended like this, or that you knew it would end like this, and you took us with you anyway. The death of Jesus shattered every belief his followers had about who God should be. What do you feel God should be doing right now that you don't see him doing? Are you able to lay these things down, entrusting them to the God whose ways aren't always known, but who's entirely good and faithful and remains sovereign over all? Jesus was dead, killed by professional executioners whose own lives depended on the death of those they were there to execute. Jesus was dead. Jesus was laid in the tomb. That tomb was sealed with the governor's seal and guarded by the governor's soldiers, professional soldiers, soldiers from the best trained and disciplined army in the world. Jesus was dead and buried. But whilst death is usually the end, this was not the end. 2 days later, on the third day, something would happen that would change the course of human history forever. So join us on Sunday, on Easter morning, to find out what happened next and the reason how and why it's a day to celebrate and a day that defines, directs and delights.